Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching A+ Essentials, Introduction to Installing and Configuring Operating Systems. This is part of Fast Track CBT Video, CompTIA A+. In this video, we'll learn about how to install operating systems. Our overall goal is to help you understand the fundamentals of installing and configuring operating systems. So to do this, first you'll learn about how to prepare for an operating system installation. You'll learn different methods of installing your OS, installation options, device drivers, upgrade considerations, how to optimize your installation, and then finally we'll perform a real operating system installation and you can see just how it works. First off, let's take a look at our A+ exam objectives. In this video, we'll cover Domain 3.0 of the A+ Essentials exam, and specifically, they talk a lot about Windows XP, but they could cover other versions of Windows, such as 2000, XP Home, or XP Media Center. In this video, we're going to talk a lot about Objective 3.2, which is Install, Configure, Optimize, and Upgrade Operating Systems, and it says that references upgrading from Windows 95 or NT may be made. Now, we're going to cover how to identify procedures for installing operating systems, such as verifying the hardware compatibility and minimum requirements, different installation methods such as boot media, like CDs, floppies, or USBs, network installations, or drive imaging. We'll talk about operating system installation options like attended or unattended, talk about disk preparation order, device driver configuration, and verification of installation. Next, we'll talk about how to identify procedures for upgrading operating systems, and then how to install or add devices with device drivers, differences between signed and unsigned drivers, driver permissions, and then finally how to optimize our operating system installation, such as virtual memory, hard drives, temporary files, services, startup, and applications. So with that, let's get started. First off, let's talk about how to prepare for installing an operating system. Now, prior to installing your operating system, it's important that you verify the hardware compatibility. Microsoft has published what they call the HCL, or the Hardware Compatibility List. Let's go take a look at that list and see what it tells us. There's the web link I had there on the slides. If I go in here to the hardware compatibility list, they say that these are products designed for Microsoft Windows, and they call this the Windows Catalog and Hardware Compatibility List. Now, in this list is all the different devices, computers, hard drives, peripherals, all sorts of devices and options for hardware that are compatible with Windows XP and have been tested on Windows XP. So here's the marketplace for tested products, and here's the Windows Server catalog. Let's look at the marketplace for tested products. So if you scroll down in here, you can go in and you can verify that the software that you're using and the hardware that you're using is compatible with Windows. Now, just because your hardware or software is not compatible with Windows doesn't mean that it's not going to work. It might work just fine. On the other hand, you might install a new networking card, let's say, and it works fine for a while, and then one day it stops working, and you find out later that it's not compatible with Windows. Typically, though, you'll find out immediately when you go to use that new device you bought at your local electronics store, you hook it up, and it just plain doesn't work. You might find out it's not compatible with Windows. Although today this is rare. If you stick with the major brands in most electronic stores, usually you're not going to have any problems. But once you start getting into more specific things like portable media players, hot technology like digital cameras, or high-end, scanners, you need to make sure that the version of Windows you're using is compatible with the driver that's being used with that device. We're going to talk more about drivers later. This has been a big issue with Windows Vista, the new replacement for Microsoft Windows XP. Windows Vista um, doesn't have as much hardware compatibility as Windows XP did because there's not a lot of drivers available for Windows Vista at this point. So let's just click on one of these categories like printers, and here you see there's 510 pages of printers that are compatible with Windows. So that's a lot of printers. Here's like the HP 995. If you go in here, it says it's supported by Windows 98. Um, let's check out another one. Here's a A6 photo printer, compatible with Windows XP Professional, Windows XP Home, and Windows 2000. And you see this little logo here that says designed for Windows XP. If you click on that, it tells you what the logo means. So this is something you can look for on the products that you buy to make sure that they're designed for Windows XP. All right, so that's the hardware compatibility list. You just want to make sure the hardware you're using is compatible with the software, your operating system, and your third-party applications. You want to also make sure the third-party applications are compatible with Windows. All right, now let's talk about the minimum requirements. The minimum requirements for installing Windows are set lower than you really want them to be. I highly recommend you don't just supply the minimum hardware to run Windows, or else you're going to be very disappointed with the performance. But for the purposes of the A+ certification, you should be knowledgeable about the minimum requirements needed to install Windows. And here's a link right here to install Windows XP Pro. Here's the minimum system requirements. I'm going to click on this so we can take a look. All right, if I scroll down, it says, here's what you need to use Windows XP Professional. You need a PC with a minimum of 300 megahertz or higher processor clock speed. 233 megahertz minimum is required. Intel Pentium Celeron family, AMD K6 Athlon or Duron. 128 megabytes of RAM. 64 megabyte minimum is supported, but may limit performance of some features. Yeah, I'll say. Really, the more RAM, the better. If you can get 256 or 512 or a gig or more, you'll be better off. 1.5 gigabytes of hard drive, available space required. Yes, definitely that is a bare minimum. Today, Windows XP, computers, new computers, come with 80 gigabytes or more. Super VGA 800 by 600 or higher resolution video adapter is required. Yes, that's definitely a bare minimum. CD or DVD drive is required. Keyboard and Microsoft mouse or compatible pointing device are required. So those are the bare minimums. But like I said, any new computer or even a relatively new computer in the past few years is going to have much more hardware than the minimum requirements. And you'll be thankful that you have it. You can go on and read more on this link about, minimum requirements for internet accessing or accessing the internet, minimum requirements for sound, so on and so forth. But it's important that you know the minimum requirements for your A+ certification. All right, now let's move on. Next, let's talk about methods of installing an operating system. Now, there's multiple methods of installing an operating system. For many end users, the OS comes pre-installed on their new computer, and they never even think about installing the operating system. However, as an A+ technician, it's very important to know how to install, reinstall, and upgrade an operating system. So, some common methods of installing operating systems I've listed out here. First off, using the boot media, or the CD. This is usually how most people install their operating system. They get the installation CD, put it in the CD drive, turn on the computer boots off of the CD instead of a local hard drive, and then the operating system is configured and copied onto the hard drive and installed using that CD. There's other alternatives for booting, such as you could boot from a DVD. You could boot from floppy and then install from a CD or a DVD, or you could boot from a USB drive. Today, USB drives have gotten so large, and many BIOS manufacturers support booting off of a USB flash drive or external drive and installing your operating system. Then you have network installation. You can install the operating system over the network. There's a service from Microsoft that's free in Windows Server called Remote Installation Services, RIS, or Automated Deployment Services, ADS. Both of these are used to install the operating system over the network. And then finally, there's drive imaging. Ghost is a commercial product that's out there, but there's other free methods to perform drive imaging. So what drive imaging is you take a working computer and you copy the entire hard drive onto another hard drive and then put that hard drive in the new computer. Another way of saying this is you take your fully working installed Windows operating system on a current computer, you image the hard drive on that, and then you copy it onto the new hard drive on your new computer. So essentially it copies everything on one computer to another computer, and then there you have your operating system already installed. You never even had to install it. Now there are a few things you need to take into consideration, like you'll need to change the name of the computer, the IP address, the SID. There's a service set identifier. It's a specific number inside the drive that has to be changed, and a few other things you'll have to take into consideration. It's a more advanced method of installing the operating system, but it's great if you need to install, mass quantities of new computers. You need to get the operating system up and going on a lot of computers all at one time. And I covered drive imaging in my Train Signal Windows XP video. And don't forget about upgrades. If you have Windows XP and you're moving to Vista, you can just upgrade. If you have Windows 98 and you're moving to Windows XP, you can upgrade. Windows 2000 to XP, you can perform an upgrade. So essentially you're taking usually the boot media, the CD, and you have your operating system already running. You insert the CD and then it performs an upgrade. And then what is dual booting or multi-booting? Dual booting means you have two operating systems on one computer. So I can install Windows 2000 and Windows XP on the same computer, and I could boot one or the other. I can't run them at the same time, but I can run one or run the other. So I run one operating system, I use it for a while, I shut it down, I reboot, and it says, what operating system do you want to load? You select the second operating system and boot up on your other operating system. So that's dual booting. All right, let's move on. Now let's talk about some different options when installing an operating system. Now when you install a new operating system, you have a number of options. First off, is this going to be an upgrade or a new installation? Will you perform an attended or unattended installation? Most of us perform an attended installation when you're just doing a one-off operating system install. So, you get a new computer, it doesn't have an operating system, you insert the CD, you go through, you answer a lot of questions, and then the operating system's installed. That's called an attended operating system installation. And that's because you had to sit there, you attended the installation, and you answered the questions. Another option for installing an operating system is an unattended installation. This means that you create an answer file ahead of time. An answer file is a text file that has all the answers that are required to install the operating system. Typically, this answer file is used in conjunction with a program called sysprep. Sysprep is used in creating this answer file from an existing operating system installation. You take the answer file and you perform the unattended installation with your new operating system. This way, you insert the CD, you give it the path to the answer file, or perhaps the answer file is included on the CD, and the operating system is just installed. You don't have to sit there and watch it. You don't have to answer a bunch of questions. It just happens automatically. Next, let's talk about partitioning the disk. Now, when you install your operating system, you will actually partition the disk, or the installation utility will do it for you, but it will ask you some questions about how do you want to partition the disk. Do you want to take the entire disk drive and install the operating system on it? Or do you just want to take a piece of the disk drive and leave some to install perhaps another operating system or create another drive letter off of the same drive? We talked about partitioning already in a previous video, but basically partitioning takes a part of the disk and assigns it to the operating system, and it could be the entire disk or just part of the disk. Now, previously this was called fdisk. Fdisk was used to partition your disk. Typically today you do this with the Windows XP installation, and it can also be done later with Disk Manager. When you partition, you need to keep in mind your partition size, and when you partition the hard drive, this creates the master boot record, which tells the BIOS that this hard drive is bootable, so the operating system can be booted from the new hard drive. When you install your operating system, you are formatting the disk drive, you format the partition, and that prepares the partition to store data. You select the file system that you are going to format the partition with. Typically this is NTFS, and the file allocation table or master file table is created. So these are kind of like the index on the disk drive that tells the operating system how to find the files and folders that are contained on that disk drive. When you install your operating system, you'll be asked typically for your license. You may have to activate Windows over the internet, or you might have a license key that you can type in to enable your version of Windows. You'll have to answer questions about network configuration. Do you want to use DHCP to get an IP address? What do you want the name of your computer to be? What do you want the work group or domain of this computer to be? You'll have to answer questions about the options for applications to be installed. Do you want a web server to be installed? Do you want a mail server to be installed? What version of different operating system applications do you want to be installed? You'll answer these questions during the installation phase. You'll have to choose your language. You'll have to choose your keyboard language. You'll have to choose verify the time and date to set those properly when you install the operating system. You'll have to set the video resolution. What kind of resolution does your monitor support, and what resolution do you want to use? So with Windows XP, there's a few different phases of this installation, and I'll be showing you these phases as we go through and install Windows a little bit later in this video. First off, there's the text installation phase of Windows. So you'll see just text. Then you'll move into graphics, where it looks more like a Windows graphical display. Once Windows is installed, there's some post-installation tasks that you'll see. And then you may have to update some drivers if you have peripherals such as a printer or a scanner, things like that that you want to use with your newly installed operating system. And finally, don't forget to verify the installation. You don't want to hand over a newly installed operating system on a new computer to an end user and then have things not work. So make sure that you use the computer a little bit for yourself. I highly recommend having a standard list of things that you check once you install an operating system to make sure the normal applications that a user would tend to use are working. For example, can they access the internet? Can they use Internet Explorer? Can they access their Microsoft Office applications, their shared drive, their email, common things like that. And then there's security in place. If you have things locked down with security, for example, can they change their desktop background? That might be something that you lock down and you prevent them from changing. So don't forget to verify the installation. All right, now let's talk about device drivers. Device drivers are pieces of software that allow your devices, your peripherals such as printers and scanners, and even things like hard drives and monitors, to communicate with the operating system. Without a device driver, you cannot use the device in your operating system. It's that simple. If you don't have the right device driver for your operating system, you're not going to be able to use the device. So once you install a new device, in the perfect world, as soon as you plug it in, Windows recognizes the device and it installs the new device driver automatically. Now, we don't always live in the perfect world, so it doesn't always work. Sometimes you'll connect a new device and it'll say device driver not found, or it'll prompt you to give it the path to the device driver. Now, many of these devices might come with the device drivers on a CD. So a lot of times the instructions will say, before you plug in this device, first install the device driver, and that way when you plug it in, it'll just automatically be recognized. And by the way, if a device comes with a CD, I highly recommend going out to the internet first and checking to make sure there's not a later revision of that device driver. So we talked about automated method for installing device drivers. You plug it in and it just installs it, or manual. Let me show you what it looks like when we connect something that requires a device driver. I'm going to pause the video just a second and I'm going to connect the device. Alright, so I've got here a Creative Labs webcam, a little video camera. I'm going to connect it. And it tells me that new hardware was found. That's a good thing. It recognized the hardware. And it tells me it's a Creative Webcam Live. Hopefully it will automatically load the driver and we won't have to load it for ourselves manually. And then it tells me your new hardware is installed and ready to use. Great. That's the perfect scenario right there. That's what we want. We want to be able to plug it in and have it just automatically recognized and installed for us without us having to intervene whatsoever. Now if I minimize this and I go to my computer, right click, go to Properties. If I go into Hardware, then to Device Manager, I can take a look at the devices that are installed on my computer. So let's see if we can find the webcam that we just connected. It might call it by a variety of different names. Let's see if it's under Sound Video Game Controllers. No. Where would a webcam be? How about imaging devices? There it is. Creative Webcam Live number 2. So it automatically found this device and it installed it. Now if I right click on this and I go into Properties, you can see here it's an imaging device. It knows it's a Creative Labs. It says the device is working properly. If I go to Driver, it tells me it has installed this Creative Labs driver dated 7/30/2004, version 1.1.1.730. So if you go out to the Creative Labs website, you can check and see if they have a later version that has maybe a more recent date or a more recent version. And then you could download it. You could do Update Driver right here. And this is actually what it looks like a lot of times when you have to manually install a driver. So it says it will search for the current driver or a driver through CD or through Windows Update website. You can say, no, not this time. It says, do you want to install the software automatically? Let's pretend we don't have any CD or any driver like that. You can say, no, I want to specify a location. Then here you can specify a path to the driver. And this could either be an updated driver if you're going to replace the driver you have already installed, or it could be that you connected this hardware and the operating system couldn't find the driver and you have to manually specify a path to the driver that you've downloaded from the internet. So this would be how you would do it. You would browse, you would find it, you would click Next, and it would copy the drivers here. Notice it's updating over here and it says it's completed the hardware update wizard. We'll say Finish. And of course we don't have a newer driver because we use the same driver we had before. You can go into driver details and you can look at all the different files that make up the driver. You can uninstall the driver, roll back the driver. But this is the device manager, very important for updating device drivers. Notice here I have a device with an exclamation point next to it, a yellow exclamation point. That tells me that there's no device driver for this device. If I right-click on this, go to Properties, it tells me the manufacturer is unknown, and it says the drivers for this device are not installed. So whatever this device is, this mass storage controller, it's not going to work. It's not going to work on this computer until I get the right driver and reinstall it. Or if I right-click here, I can go to Update Driver. So let's go back to our drivers section in our slides. And so we talked about adding and installing the automated method or the manual method. There has to be proper permissions so that whoever's installing the driver has the permission to install a driver. So like on Windows, if you're not administrator or a member of the administrator group or administrator equivalent user, by default you won't have the permissions to install a driver on the system. So say you hook up a modem or some other device, you might not have the permissions to install the driver to use that device unless you're administrator equivalent. There's a difference between signed and unsigned drivers. Signed drivers just mean that they're sort of authenticated by Microsoft, or they have a certificate that says that they're valid, uncompromised drivers. They're not some kind of virus that you found and downloaded from the internet. Signed drivers have a certificate that says that they're authentic drivers. We went into Device Manager and we verified that the driver was installed. We looked at the functionality of Device Manager and how you can update device drivers and see when device drivers are not installed and devices aren't functioning properly because they don't have the right device drivers. All right, so let's move on. And now let's talk about upgrade considerations. So when it comes to upgrading your operating system, there's some things you need to take into consideration. Say you're running, let's say worst case, you might laugh, but say you're running Windows 98. And or maybe you go over to a friend's house and you laugh at him because he's running Windows 98. And say you're going to help out this friend by helping him to upgrade to the latest version of Windows, Windows XP, or even Windows Vista. What do you need to think about before you just insert the CD and start the upgrade? Well, there's a number of things. First off, in my opinion, it's always best to do a clean installation. A clean installation means you wipe out everything on the hard drive, you reinstall the operating system from scratch, then reinstall all the applications and copy back on your data. That's a clean installation. And I recommend a clean installation because you have the best chance of everything working just fine. On the other hand, you have to reinstall all these applications. So it's a serious pain, but it gives you the best chance to not have degraded performance and not have different application incompatibilities or issues because you started fresh. Your hard drive was formatted and the operating system and applications were reinstalled. Now, an upgrade means you took your existing operating system and you installed a new version on top of it and upgraded it. So that's the difference between a clean installation and an upgrade. However, there will be times that you end up doing an upgrade. Say you tell your friend, gee, I really recommend a clean installation. It's going to give you the best performance and everything, and he says, no way, I can't do that. I've got all my applications installed. I don't have the original software. I'll never be able to find it. I downloaded a bunch of stuff from the internet and I got it from friends. I don't know how I would ever put all that software back. And you say, well, then you're going to have to do an upgrade because that's the only way you're going to get to the latest version of Windows is to do an in-place upgrade since you don't have the applications to reinstall. Or I've seen this on servers. A lot of servers over years, different administrators have installed different pieces of applications, and there's just so many complex pieces that no one feels confident that they could ever put the applications back together again how they are. So you choose to do an upgrade to the operating system because you want to get the operating system upgraded, but you don't want to have to do a clean install. So before you do an upgrade, here's a list of things that you need to take into consideration. First, you want to verify the upgrade path. Can you upgrade from Windows 98 to Windows XP Service Pack 2? Can you upgrade from Windows 98 to Windows Vista? You know, is this a valid upgrade path? That's something you want to take into account. You want to ensure hardware compatibility. You know, we talked about the hardware compatibility list. You want to make sure that this old PC that's running Windows 98, will it really support Windows Vista? Is that hardware compatible? Is that software that's running on there compatible? You know, you don't want to do an upgrade, even though, say, Microsoft says the upgrade path is valid. You don't want to do an upgrade and then all the applications don't work anymore. You might need those applications. Those might be critical applications. Many times it's necessary to get upgrades to the applications to go with the upgrade to the operating system. So, you know, this could be a huge headache. There could be a lot more to just upgrading your operating system than just, you know, upgrading the operating system. You might have to upgrade a lot of applications. Make sure you install the necessary updates. A lot of times when we have the installation CD for, say, Windows XP, a lot of times it doesn't contain the service pack. And that service pack might be the piece you need to really secure that operating system. You know, the service packs come out a few months after the operating system was installed, and many times they contain all the patches for security and bugs that you really need. Make sure you back up the computer before you do an upgrade. You know, you don't want to have to lose your data or lose your applications because you didn't do a backup and the operating system upgrade went bad. Make sure you use an upgrade utility if one is available. For example, WinNT.exe is used for Windows 95, 98 to go to Windows 2000 or XP. WinNT32 is used to upgrade from NT to 2000 or XP. These are utilities on the installation media that allow you to do the upgrade. Now, after the upgrade, make sure you update drivers if needed, because the drivers are for the operating system. So the driver for Windows 98 is going to be different than the driver for Windows XP. Make sure you go out and update the device drivers for all the hardware that you have connected to that computer. And verify the proper functionality of the operating system and the applications after the upgrade. Now, generally, to do an upgrade, you can insert the new operating system CD into the computer while the current operating system is running, and if auto run or auto play is enabled on that CD drive, you'll receive the upgrade screen that says, welcome to Windows XP. Would you like to perform an upgrade on this computer? And if so, you can go ahead and just go through with the upgrade, and, you know, like we said, in the perfect world, everything works and you don't have any problems. But before you do that, make sure you take these things into consideration that I listed out up here. Especially if it's not your own computer. You don't want to mess up someone else's computer, you know, promising them that you're going to help them out by installing a new Windows operating system and making their life easier, when instead, after you do the upgrade, they lose all their data and all their applications. And you don't have a backup to go back to, right? That would be bad. Now, note that when you perform an upgrade, you may also want to convert your file system, say from FAT to NTFS. For example, back in Windows 98, you didn't have NTFS. So when you do the upgrade to Windows XP, you typically upgrade that to NTFS. All right, let's move on to optimizing. So now let's talk about optimizing the operating system. Now, on the first day you install your operating system, it will run at its optimal performance, most likely. After that, the more you use it and the more applications and upgrades you install on it, the worse the performance will become. You know, I think of this as like a new car. You know, the first day you bring the new car home, there's not a scratch on it, there's no dust on it, there's no food or, you know, dirt stuck in the cracks. And, you know, even just a few weeks later, that new car, over just those few weeks, tends to get scratches, dings, little things that go wrong with it. It's almost impossible to protect it from everything. Well, the operating system's no different. As soon as you install your operating system, it's going to run really the best that it can run, most likely. And then as soon as you connect to the internet, you start downloading temporary internet files and cookies, and you start installing a bunch of applications, and they install things that start up automatically. And that means that when you boot up your computer, it takes longer to start because it has to start all these new applications that were set to automatically run, and so on and so forth. Anyway, the performance just goes downhill from there. That's my general feeling about optimized operating systems. Now, to prevent this degradation over time, I recommend installing as few applications as possible on a Windows computer. I also periodically reinstall my operating system. That's my personal preference. I go with a clean install, every year, let's say, and just wipe the whole computer clean and start fresh. I don't recommend going out to the internet and downloading a bunch of demos, a bunch of shareware, and just going crazy, trying all these different programs on your computer, because invariably you're not going to be able to uninstall them. They can install spyware. They can slow down your computer. All sorts of weird things. Even if you try to properly uninstall those applications, chances are they're going to end up bogging down your computer in one way or the other. So maybe you have a separate computer that you try out applications on, or you use virtualization, which is a new technology where you can run a computer inside a computer. In fact, that's what I'm going to be using to demonstrate installing Windows XP down here. This program called VMware, I'm going to be using that to demonstrate running a computer inside my computer. Well, many times I use that to test applications I download from the internet before I install them on my real computer, because that way, if I don't like what happens to this virtual computer running inside my computer, I can just delete the virtual computer and start fresh. Anyway, to maintain or optimize your Windows system, there are some tasks that you need to know how to perform, and periodically you need to actually perform them. So these tasks are, first off, reboot. I don't know how many users call and complain of some problem, and I say, when was the last time you rebooted? Well, it's been, a few weeks, maybe a month. Well, reboot. I recommend rebooting every day before you leave the office, right before you go home. Just reboot your PC. Next up is manage virtual memory. Check on your virtual memory settings. How large is your swap file? How large do you have your virtual memory set to? See if you need to change that. Defragment your hard drive. You can set this to run on a schedule. There's software out there that will do it for you on boot automatically, or Windows has defragmentation built in. I recommend defragmenting your hard drive periodically. Use disk caching. This is a setting on your disk drive. Clean up temporary internet files. These can get huge over time. You can go into Internet Explorer and configure it to not save temporary internet files, or only use a small amount of space for temporary internet files. Clean up temporary files. Applications like Office or other applications you download will create temporary files on your computer. Go in and clean these up periodically. Remove startup services or applications. For example, inside the Start menu, there's a folder called inside Programs called Startup. Inside Startup are applications that start automatically when your computer boots. If you're not using them, get rid of them. Go in there and delete them. They're just shortcuts. Or go down here to the taskbar and you'll find applications that start automatically. You can right-click on those and you can turn them off if you don't need them. Look at the processes on your system. Now, this can be a daunting task even for knowledgeable Windows administrators. But there are some programs out there called, or for example, one of them is called Process Explorer. But if I bring up Task Manager, what I'm talking about is this list of processes here. If I sort these alphabetically, these are all the programs that are running on my computer. This is the amount of CPU that they're taking up, and this is the amount of memory that are taking up. Well, ask yourself periodically, what are all these applications and why do I need them? And you can compare what's on a new computer to what's on your current computer. And if you're not using a process or application, you can go out on the internet and you can try to figure out what these are, and perhaps you can uninstall that process. Perhaps you can remove it from the registry with certain registry cleaning applications, or perhaps you can remove it from your startup folder inside Start Programs. So just so you're aware of what is running on your computer, and everything that's running is causing your performance to go just a tiny bit slower. So keep that in mind. Every little program, every little piece of memory that's taken up causes your computer to go a little bit slower than it did the day that your operating system was installed. So those are a few tips I have on optimizing your operating system. All right, now let's talk about performing an operating system installation. I want to show you exactly how this is done on a real computer. And to do that, I'm going to go down here to this program. It's called a virtualization program. The name of it is VMware. So if I click on the VMware application, what it shows you is this virtual computer, this computer inside my computer. It shows you the settings for it. It has 512 megabytes of RAM. It has an 8 gigabyte hard drive. It has a CD-ROM drive. And in that CD-ROM drive, I've taken the actual CD for Windows XP Professional, the installation CD for the operating system, and I've put it in the CD-ROM drive. I have a network adapter, and I'm sharing the CPU processor with my physical computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this play button up here, and when I do that, that's just like me powering on the computer. So you don't need to know anything about this VMware application, only to know that I'm using it to demonstrate to you what a real computer would look like when I put in the CD and I turn on the computer and we perform a Windows XP installation. So I'm going to power on the computer. And I hear the CD-ROM drive spinning. It says it's inspecting my computer's hardware. And then it starts loading the device drivers that it will need to install Windows. Now notice how you have just text here, and this line is kind of a text looking line. This is the text-based installation portion of Windows. So it takes a minute to go through and load all the different device drivers. And in just a minute we'll be answering questions on the Windows XP installation. You see it loading things like CD drivers, keyboard drivers, video drivers, disk controllers. These are all important drivers that it will need to install the operating system on these different types of hard drives and using different types of CD-ROMs. Now it says it's starting Windows. The last two drivers I noticed it loaded were NTFS and FAT. Those are the two different types of file systems that we can format our hard drive with. So now it says welcome to setup. This portion of the setup program prepares Windows XP to run on your computer. To set up Windows XP now, press enter. So I'm going to press enter. You could also use the CD to repair Windows XP if something happened to your XP installation. So now this is the licensing agreement. This is the legal portion we have to acknowledge by pressing F8. All right, now we're in the part of the installation where we have to partition our hard drive. Here it says that we have 8190 megabytes, that's 8 gigabytes, of hard drive space on our hard drive. Now, right now it says that it's unpartitioned space, so there's no hard drive partition. So here we have to use this piece of the setup to create a partition on the hard drive so that that partition can be formatted and then the operating system can be installed. So to create a partition, if you notice on the bottom, it says C equals create partition. So I'm going to press C, and it asks me what size of partition do I want to create. Well, typically most Windows users who just have one operating system take the entire hard drive and partition it, format it, and load their operating system. And that way they have one very large hard drive that they can use for whatever they want to use it for. Now, if you want to do a multi-boot, you might want to split up the hard drive in two. Or maybe you have some server application that's going to need multiple hard drive partitions, like a drive C, a drive G, and a drive H, let's say. In that case, you might want to partition the hard drive into three different hard drives. But in our case, and as is the case with most computer users, we're just going to take up the entire hard drive and install our operating system. So I'll take the default of creating a partition for with 8182 megabytes. I'm going to press enter. And now notice that there's 8182 megabytes, and there was 8 megabytes free that couldn't be partitioned. I'm going to go ahead and press enter to install. All right, now it's telling us that we need to format this hard drive. So to format the hard drive, we can select either the NTFS file system or the FAT file system. I highly recommend NTFS. It has so many more features, security, logging, and reliability. And that's why we're going to choose NTFS. And then I'm going to choose the quick option because, why do something slowly if you can do something quickly? So we'll choose NTFS file system quick, and I'll press enter. At this point, it's going to format the 8 gigabyte hard drive partition. If I had chosen the other option, the non-quick option, I can tell you it takes a while. But this formatting with the quick version won't take very long. The hard drive was formatted, it checks out the disk, and then what it does now is it begins copying files. So it copies just enough files so that it can reboot the system and then begin the graphical copying of files. Once the graphical version of copying is done, you'll be asked to answer a number of configuration questions, and then Windows will be ready for use. So while this copying is occurring, I'm going to pause the recording of the video so you don't have to sit here and wait through this. And then as soon as the copying is completed, I'll be right back. All right, the copying is done, and it says now my computer will reboot. So it's going through, it's restarting the computer. And now we've moved into the graphical portion of the installation. Now there's still more files left to copy and still some more configuration questions to answer, but at least we're out of that text mode and we're into this graphical mode. So now it tells us the status of this installation. See here where we were collecting information, that's done. Dynamic update, that's done. Preparing installation, that's done. And now we're in the graphical portion of installing Windows. You can see that's the colored option right here. And it says that setup will complete in approximately 39 minutes. And you see this little bar down here kind of moving across the screen like the old Knight Rider car kit from the old TV show. Tells us that progress is happening. So I don't want you to sit here and watch this for another 39 minutes. So at this point, I'm going to pause the video again, and I'll be right back. All right, before the installation can continue, we have some more configuration questions to answer. And we talked about these in our slides. We need to answer these questions about our language settings. We're not going to customize those. We're just going to take the defaults. We need to type in our name. We need to enter our volume license key. In this case, this is a volume license product. For like Windows XP Home, there will be activation that you have to do over the internet. In our case, we have a product key that we can enter. I'm going to go ahead and enter that product key and then resume the video after I enter the product key. I'll be right back. All right, next we need to answer some questions about what do we want to call this computer. What's going to be the name of this computer? And I'll call this WinXP1. Keep in mind though that in most companies, unless this is just a home computer, in most companies and small businesses, you want to have some kind of naming convention. So maybe the name of your company, XYZ dash PC1 or XYZ dash site 1 dash PC1. Some sort of easy way to know, oh yeah, this is company XYZ, it's over at site 1, and this is PC number 1. That way, if a user has a question, you could put a label on the front of the computer, and you could easily find that computer in any sort of system administrator tool. Now you need to type an administrator password. I'm going to go ahead and do that and click Next. Next, we have to confirm the time and the date, and the time and the date is correct, although I need to change my time zone, and we will automatically adjust the clock for daylight savings. I'll click Next. Now the network drivers are being installed, and in just a second we'll be asked some questions about the network configuration. So it says, do you want to use the typical settings for your network devices? We will. We'll take the defaults. And do you want this computer to be a member of a work group or a domain? We'll take the work group, and we're going to call it XYZ work group. Okay, it's doing the network configuration. Take just a second. And now it's moved on to the final phase of copying files. So once it's done copying these files, it says there's about 29 minutes left. We'll be done with the graphical installation. There'll probably be a few more questions or tips or something like that after the installation is completed, and then we can use the operating system. So for now, I'm going to pause the video recording again, and I'll be right back as soon as copying files is completed. All right, we're back, and after the copying of the files completed, we were presented with this screen, and it says to begin, click your username and type in your password. So I'm going to type in the administrator password that I specified in the installation. It says our personal settings are being applied, and in just a second we should see our Windows desktop. The first time a new user logs on, sometimes it takes a little bit longer because it copies from the default profile into the person's new profile. So here we go. Let me scroll down so you can see the Start menu down there. It offers to take us on a tour of Windows XP, which would be great if you're a new Windows XP user. We don't need that right now. And you can see we have our Start menu with all of our different icons and default applications that are installed when Windows is installed. Windows Movie Maker, Media Player, MSN Explorer, take a tour of Windows XP, File and Settings Transfer Wizard, that's used to transfer settings from an old computer to the new computer. Inside all programs, we have things like Games, Startup, Internet Explorer, and Accessories. Down here you can see that Windows Messenger started automatically. That might be something we don't want. We can choose to exit it, but it will just start up automatically again. The only way to get rid of that is to open it up, cancel the passport, go into Options, Preferences, and turn it off so that when Windows starts, it doesn't start automatically. Close that out, and then exit so it won't come back. So we're done with the installation, and we've proven that our settings that we configured, our questions we answered, and the files that we copied were successful in creating a usable Windows XP installation. So that's how you install Windows XP. And with that, we can return to our slides. And we've reached the conclusion of the video. So in this video, we learned how to prepare for an operating system installation, all the things you need to take into consideration, such as the hardware compatibility list and the requirements for the minimums to install your operating system. We talked about different methods for installing your operating system, such as network installation, installation from CD, booting from floppy, booting from USB drive, or even DVD. We talked about installation options, such as attended installation versus unattended installation, and how SysPrep is a program that's used to aid you in doing an unattended installation. We talked about device drivers and their importance in making your devices work with your operating system, how they're operating system dependent, meaning a device driver for Windows 98 isn't going to work for Windows XP. We talked about upgrade considerations, important things like backing up your operating system, uh, checking out your upgrade path to make sure you're going from the proper version to the next proper version. Saving your settings, determining whether or not you want to do a clean installation versus an upgrade. Then we talked about optimizing your installation and how the first day that you install your operating system is usually the best that it's ever going to perform, and every application and uh, more web surfing you do, is just going to degrade your performance over time. So it's important that you maintain your computer by getting rid of temporary internet files, temporary files, reducing installing applications. Try not to install any more applications than you have to have, defragmenting your hard drive, and keeping your system up to date with patches. Those are all things you can do to optimize your installation. And then finally, we saw how to perform a real Windows XP installation from start to finish. We performed that on our virtual computer, and you saw how I put in the CD-ROM. We answered the installation questions. We partitioned our hard drive. We formatted the hard drive. We copied files. We answered questions like our language, our license file, our computer name, our network settings, our keyboard files, so on and so forth. And in the end, we saw that our installation of Windows XP was successful. So with that, we've reached the end of installing your operating system, part of A+ Essentials training. Thank you very much.